Demon fans, and welcome back to the Demonland podcast. My name is Andy, and the Demons' 6-match winning streak at Optus Stadium has come to an end after a 35-point loss to the Eagles, which handed the D's their second loss on the trot as they slumped to 7th place on the ladder. Joining me tonight to dissect our loss in the West is longtime Demonlander George. Good evening, George.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening to Bin Man, and good evening to all our listeners. And this week we've got a big question for all our listeners to answer. I want to know, what's worse? Is it worse being a Richmond supporter and losing by 20 goals? Or is it worse being a Geelong supporter, second on the ladder, and losing by 10 goals? Or is it worse being a Carlton supporter and losing by 9 goals? Or is it worse being a Hawthorn supporter, 5 goals up in the last quarter and losing with 17 seconds to go? Or is it worse being a Melbourne supporter and losing to a side that's only won 7 games in the past 3 years? I need the answers.
Or 3 of the last 5. There's another way of looking at that.
It's always worse being a Melbourne supporter. Also joining us tonight to explain to us why we're still in the box seat to claim the flag, despite this loss to a bottom 3 team, is B-Man. Good evening, B-Man.
Good evening, Andy. Good evening, George. Good evening, Demonlanders. Well, 2 things is what's worse is I'm glad I didn't go to Perth. Last time I was there was our horror 2018 prelim. You're wanting a reason why we could win the flag, Andy, is that right? By beating a bottom 3 team? Well, round 21 last year, after getting flogged by nearly 100 points in the preceding weeks, and we flogged them by 70-odd points, the Hawks rolled the Pies in round 21. And I don't know, call me crazy, but didn't the Pies go on to win the flag just a matter of 5-6 weeks later?
You're crazy.
Oh, crazy. Sorry, they failed that litmus test. So do you know what? I think retrospectively we have to take the Pies flag off them, because in round 21, when a bottom 3 team, they finished 3rd on the 16th on the ladder last year, the mighty Hawks did, with 7 wins, and I would argue the West Coast Eagles are doing much better than the Hawks were at this time of the season last year. But round 21, the Hawks rolled the Pies. Now, if every game's a litmus test, I'm going to argue with the AFL that the flag should go to the Demons, because we flogged the Hawks, of course, and so that nullifies that. So, you know, there you go. There's your historical pointer, everyone. It was only 1 year ago, not even 1 year ago, that a bottom 3 team beat a side that went on to win a premiership.
You sound like one of those kids who says to their parents, but they're all doing it.
Well, hold on. You can't have your cake and eat it too. You can't say, oh, woe is me. Oh, no good team would ever get beaten by a bottom 3 team. That's it.
It's not about
when
losing.
It happens last year. It wasn't in the beginning of the season. It was in round 21.
It's not about losing
I've got the results
to the bottom team.
Like a bit
it's
more
how
detail.
We lost and how we looked, and we look like we've got a lot of problems.
It was 105 points to 73 points at the MCG, round 21 on Saturday, August the 5th. 32 points, got beaten by a team that finished 16th. Look, in fact, I'm shocked. I can't even think how Collingwood, surely let's take it off them. I mean, honestly, and all jokes aside, let's take the flag off the Pies.
No, I don't care. I'm going to be like my mum. I don't care what the other parents are doing, what the other kids are doing. You're grounded.
You're right. That's it. So that's also then, as George noted, that's it for the Swans. Because they got beaten by the Tigers. And the Tigers just got beaten by a bazillion points on the weekend. Can't run out of their own shadow.
I would gladly have lost.
That's it. The Swans are gone.
I would gladly have lost this game.
160 points put past them.
The Cats, I would be worried if I was the Cats as well.
They're gone. Blues are gone. Who's like Port got beaten by the Crows by 6 goals just 3 weeks back. They're gone.
All right. Well,
Giants have lost 3 in a row, and they were the flag favourites 3 weeks ago. And everyone reckons they were the second coming of the Orange Tsunami. They're gone.
Well, let's see what happens next week. All right, we'll be back next week, and we'll see. Who's going to say I told you so next week? All right, let's move on.
No
We've
one.
got lots
Let's
to
how
talk
about we
about.
say I told you so or otherwise come the finals. Okay?
If we're there. If we're there, I'm worried we're not even going to make it.
Yeah, of course.
Let's just get moving. There were no reviews this week on Apple Podcasts, but I'll still put out the call to our loyal listeners to help us out by leaving us that 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts. We do love the feedback, and we do reward our loyal listeners who have taken the time to provide a 5-star review. So get them in. We'll give you a shout out on the show. If you follow us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and you want to leave us a feedback or post a comment or a question for the show, you can post under our podcast post each week or just slide into our DMs. In addition to being available on Apple, Google, Spotify, SoundCloud, or your preferred podcasting app, the Demonland podcast is also available on YouTube. So just search for Demonland or Demonland Podcast to find our channel. If you want to chat with other Demon fans, you've never been on our forum, head on over to demonland.com. Sign up. You can chat with other Demon fans from across Australia and around the world. It's completely free. And in addition to being able to post questions or comments for this show, there are multiple topics and threads discussing all things Demons related, where you can argue with BimMan on whether we're going to make the finals or not. So join up to join in on the conversation. I assure you it's far superior than anything you'll read on any social media platform. If you'd like to join us on the air tonight to talk about any of the topics that we're going to talk about, give us a call on 0390163666. That's 0390163666. I'll answer, I'll put you on mute, I'll bring you on when there is a break in the conversation. And during the week, you can give that number a call and leave us a voicemail. Don't worry, no one answers the phone, so just leave us a message. We'll play it on the show. If you're listening live, come join us in the chat room at demonland.com/podcast. We are live every Monday, so if you want to listen to the show live, head on over to demonland.com on Monday nights at 8:30 p.m. Let's get into the match overview. In our game day thread on Demonland, I warned Demonlanders that this was a danger game for the D's. Some people laughed at me, but it came as no surprise to me that the 16th place Eagles delivered a shocking 35-point victory over the Demons at Optus Stadium. The win is their third in their last 4 home games, and it signified a dramatic resurgence from their wooden spoon finish just 9 months ago. The Eagles' triumph sent the Demons tumbling to 7th place on the ladder after delivering the D's worst loss in 2 seasons. Wonderkind number 1 draft pick Harley Reid showcased his exceptional talent with 21 disposals, 7 clearances and 2 goals. His standout moment came with a breathtaking 45-metre goal from a centre clearance, don't arguing and outpacing Clayton Oliver and Christian Petrarca. Also dominating the Eagles' forward line was Jake Waterman, who monstered both early on Stephen May and then Tom McDonald on his way to kicking 5 goals. And crucial in the midfield, Tim Kelly amassed 30 disposals and Liam Duggan 29, and both of them, along with Reid and Gibney, played key roles in the Eagles' midfield dominance. And that dominance was on display early as yet another club got an early jump on the Demons, a worrying trend that is creeping into many D's games this season. An early concussion injury to Jake Lever saw him subbed out, and that did not help matters in defence as the Eagles went on to a first break lead of 14 points. The Eagles continued their high pressure into the second quarter as they extended their lead to 27 points before the D's fought back with goals to Brown and Chandler, cutting the margin to 9 points by half-time. In the third quarter, Melbourne gained an inside 50 advantage but struggled with accuracy, scoring 3 goals, 7 for the quarter. The Eagles had no such problem with accuracy and extended their lead to 18 points at the final break. In the final term, the home team broke away, outscoring the D's 4 goals to 1 and securing a comfortable win. The Eagles did their homework and copied the playbook of other clubs using the physical approach on Max Gawn and were relentless in blocking with physical pressure off the ball and disrupting his influence in the ruck contest, and hence Big Maxie found it difficult to impact the game despite being one of the D's better players. West Coast's game plan focused on relentless pressure and physicality, forcing turnovers and disrupting Nam's rhythm. In contrast, the D's failed to exert the same pressures and therefore were not able to use their one wood in scoring from turnovers. And I'm sick of talking about this game already, so let's just get on with it. Any general stuff from the game, big man.
Oh, it was terrible, wasn't it? I mean,
yeah.
Where is that? I can't remember the worst performance.
Well, I heard them saying, that's why I said it there, was our worst loss in 2 years. I haven't looked back, and I can look while you guys are talking. Who was it?
It's all right. I've got some stats that will that sort of highlight how terrible it was. It was. I felt like not very confident even at halftime, to be honest. It was a bad start right from the get-go of that match.
We just never looked like, I was saying to George before, every time they went forward, they were finding loose men going almost coast to coast without us touching it. But every time we got the ball, we never had a loose man. We couldn't we were always kicking to a contest unless we went across the ground. And then every time then we went forward, it was just contest, and we were losing.
Yeah.
Most of it was a 50-50.
We looked flat, and they were up and about. And just before, and so that we don't forget it, so I don't forget it, credit to the Eagles. I thought they would fade, and they didn't. They ran out the game, and it's interesting when we get to the pressure numbers, they really reflect that, almost exactly the opposite. Ours progressively got worse, and theirs progressively got better. And I thought they played brilliantly, played with great energy. They were really, really not just sort of there to play; they were up for the fight. And they exposed some, challenges for us, as we'll talk a bit about later. But I'm sort of amazed at the focus people are still putting on the midfield. It wasn't, our forward line. We had, they had more goals. Their two key forwards had 8 goals won, which was more or equal to the number of possessions Benny Brown and Petty had together. So, they had the same number of goals as we could manage possessions from our equivalent players. It was they looked good from the get-go, and we looked terrible, and never got into it, did we? But it was also, I have to say, it's the first time I properly watched 𝗟𝗓. He is, the hype is real. A kid can play. Yeah. I mean, good Lord, no wonder we were keen to get him. He looks, he's a beast, isn't he? And but it wasn't just him. Waterman is playing out of his skin, and it was interesting watching that defensive stuff. We really lacked that player coming in third man into a contest, and we suddenly look mortal down there. And Waterman, he's looks like a mini Fraser Gehrig. I know everyone's saying it, but his hands are so sticky. He took his chances. Look, regardless of how badly we played, I wouldn't want anything to be taken away from how well they played, and they thoroughly deserved that victory. There's no question of that. And just on that front, expected scores, interestingly, more almost bang on for both teams. You don't see that often. So I don't want to take. We were woeful, but I don't want to take anything away from West Coast. They were terrific and deserved the win.
George, anything?
No, not really. It was a shocking game from our perspective. I think we're going to see a lot more, not necessarily as Melbourne supporters. We're starting to see a lot more of this these anomalies occurring within the game. I think it's been there's a lot more fatigue and a lot more injuries occurring that people don't just yet appreciate. We're 10 games into a 24-game season, and we saw what happened to Geelong. We saw what happened to Richmond. We saw what happened to Carlton. It's across the whole board. We look at the injuries list from some of these same clubs which are challenging for the top of the ladder, us included. There's injuries occurring. Carlton's got huge numbers of soft tissue injuries.
Soft tissue,
yeah. Geelong, the old bodies are wearing out, but they've got 3 or 4 of their best players are off, and they're off for weeks at a time. Then it's not a 1 week soreness type of stuff. These guys are off for 3 and 4 weeks. Hamstrings seem to be occurring all over the place, and I think that's the nature of the game and the fixture that expecting players to play after 5 days or even 6 days is becoming too hard for a lot of them, and we're only halfway through the season.
Ridiculous. The AFL are going to kill the bloody golden goose. It's just a joke, and I've been banging on about this. And on the weekend, you mentioned injuries. Giants, Kelly's out with a soft tissue injury. I think a calf or maybe a thigh or something, or he's 6 weeks out. Josh Kelly, you take him out of the Giants team, that's going to have a huge impact. We've lost Lever now, knee injury and concussion. It's a huge toll on the players.
Yeah.
It's a tough game aerobically and physically, no doubt about it.
Yeah, Richmond, as an example, they only had 26 players to choose from this week. 26 off a list of 44. It's just ridiculous halfway through the season. And these aren't collision injuries. These are soft tissue type injuries and basically wear and tear. It's proving to be too hard on the bodies of the players being expected to play this game.
And there's talk about them wanting more games. It's just, it's like it is crazy. I mean, the they're the stewards of the game, and all they're interested, it seems to me, is in the profit margin, and it's so short-sighted. AFL players, just to get a gig in AFL football now, you need to be pretty close to an elite level athlete. And how many of them running around Australia are there who can be an elite level athlete and an elite kick and an elite handball? And with another team coming in, it's just a recipe for a lot of rubbish games of footy, to be honest. And we're coming into that phase now with the bye coming up where every year we get a bunch of terrible games of footy. And we've already had some on this weekend just gone, including, of course, unfortunately, the D's.
Right, Beans, B-Man, let's get into your stats files.
All right. Well, it was... I talked last week about our way we set up and played was like a retro round in terms of going back to a forward half model 21 to 23, territory, inside 50s. But this game was like going back in time to 1981. So how bad was it? This was the first match since round 9 2020 when no Melbourne player polled any coaches' votes, and none deserved any. So I'm glad they didn't get any. That was Melbourne's fewest inside 50s since 2015, excluding 2020 when we had the shorter quarters. So, Andy?
No, I said wow.
Yeah, so that's 9 years, fewest inside 50s, equals second most points conceded from turnovers and second fewest points scored from turnovers from the beginning of 2021, and the worst differential in points from turnovers since 50 points. We conceded 50 points last year, in 2022 in round 12 against Sydney. So, and there's a bunch of other numbers I could point to. That's just four that actually Wheelo ratings had up on Demonland. So I'm sure we could point to any number of others. But so the blueprint this week was interesting. We played appallingly, but we were still trying to play in the way that we're trying to implement this new method this year, the red and blueprint, no doubt about it. So defense is obviously the two core parts of our game: fundamentals, defense, and contest. Defense, I think defensively we were poor, full stop, and normally we would do better at covering a loss like Lever, but even then it shouldn't be ignored, the fact that we lost our key interceptor down back and one of our leaders of the defensive back half. What was it? How many? 2-3 minutes into the game?
Yeah,
it's very early on. Yeah,
really early on, and we didn't have another tall who could really sag off and play that intercepting role. I was really surprised, to be honest, that Goody didn't put Petty back to play that role.
The only reason maybe not is because they were using him as the relief ruckman as well.
Yeah. So that might well be a point, and I thought he did all right actually.
Like if JVR was playing, we probably definitely would have done that.
And I thought, without that intercepting defender, Tommy Mack got shown up defensively one-on-one. I mean, he's not ever been the best one-on-one player. That's not been his goal. He's been a mobile defender, sort of not really an interceptor, but certainly up and down the ground running type defender. And that's what he has been this year as well. So one-on-one, but he was getting no help, was he? He was no third-up help whatsoever.
That's what was really missing. I think Tommy Mack was holding his own, from a strength position, particularly with Waterman, but Lever would have come across the top and just punched the ball into the third row. Yeah,
exactly. Like the one that he marked, Waterman marked near the line. That was just, and there was another one where between Howes and Windsor, they couldn't work it out how to sort of stop that mark coming in. That would be the one that Lever would get across to. And of any team, or not any team, perhaps Blues are a better example. But they sort of were super well placed, the Eagles, to exploit Lever being out because they're Darling and Waterman, two big talls. So May had to go to one of them. And I thought it was interesting. It was some sort of comment. I thought that May got taken off Waterman essentially, and T-Mac was put onto him. That's only the fourth time since the start of 2020 we've had 100 points put past us. So, that's there's no way to spin that positively. So intercepts was really a critical part of the game, obviously. We had 9 less intercept marks than them. Again, that's Lever. It's not just Lever taking them, but he obviously is a big factor in our intercept marking. We had 9 less intercepts, full stop, generally. Marks inside 50, I was surprised this was so low because I thought they killed us for marks inside 50. It was 9-13, but they had some really good looks and close to goal. And again, Waterman took his chances. So the second one for the blueprint contest, contested possessions, was really interesting. So obviously we had a poor start, but really we weren't. I mean, what was the margin at quarter time, Andy? It was only...
well, it was 14 points or something in quarter
so
time, then 9 points, then 18.
We weren't out of it at quarter time.
No, we weren't even out of it at three-quarter time. I mean, I didn't think we were going to win, but 18 points isn't at three-quarter time, it's not out of it.
That's right, yeah. So we were in that, but so really, I thought our start wasn't as bad. We were flat, and maybe, but I, to be honest, it wasn't as if we were completely out of it. That said, we were down 10 contested possessions again. This is what happened against the Blues. We were down 10 contested possessions after about 8-9 minutes, I reckon. But almost identically like the Blues game, we ended up level. 123 each. So we split contested possessions. So our contest was pretty good from that point on. So in that time, in that 8 minutes, they only got 2 goals clear of us. So it wasn't as if, we weren't switched on. That's right, we weren't, but it wasn't as if they took full toll of us not being switched on. So the contested possessions were dead even. But this is interesting. And for people who haven't seen it or haven't visited Demonland who are listening, there's a thread called Stats File, which has got some great data on it. And each week Wheelo Ratings puts up some key data and stats from the game. And that's where I largely get these numbers. And this week, and so thanks if he's listening, shout out, he put up the numbers that I've been asking for around, or that I've asked if he could get hold of, around post-clearance contested possessions and pre-clearance contested possessions, but in particular post-clearances. But he also has put the contested possessions for forward 50 and defensive 50. So these you can't get that data, so that data's not available. These are estimates by Wheelo and are indicative, but he's used sort of multiple sources to get these numbers. And in the other, so the categories are hard ball get, loose ball get, and other. And other includes contested marks, free kicks, contested knock-ons, gathers from hitouts, and ruck hard ball gets. So interestingly, in our defensive 50, we were +6 for hard ball gets, +7 for in loose ball gets, and 6 for other. Remember what I said with other. So we were +19 for contested possessions in our defensive 50, which is pretty impressive going. This is where it gets less impressive. In our forward 50, we were down 2 for hard ball gets. We only had 1 hard ball get inside our forward 50, and read into that whatever you want. We had 7 loose ball gets, but they had 15, so down 8, and then other, we were down 3. So we were 13 in our forward 50, down 13 for contested possessions inside our forward 50. This is the big one. Post-clearance, and Damien Hardwick has long said this is the most important stat in the game. And I mentioned this a couple of weeks ago. This may not be as important anymore with the way we play because this is really forward half. So they smashed us in this hardball get. They were up 3. We were down 2 for loose ball get, down 10 for other. So remembering others, contested marks, free kicks, contested knock-ons, gathers and hit-outs, ruck ball, hard gets. So we're 15 in total down for post-clearance, and they played a really high contested game, very much like the Goodwin 20 or the Tigers Hardwick model as well, 20 to 23 model. high pressure, inside 50s. They smashed us for inside 50s, and they smashed us for post-clearance possession. This one, the opposite of it, is behind the ball, pre-clearance. So hard ball gets, we're up by 6, and other we're up by 12. So for pre-clearance contested possessions, we were plus 15. But it's that post-clearance that they really hurt us, and the ball got out from a clearance, and they just won too many of those balls. Pressure is a big factor, obviously, in the contest, sort of indicative of the contest. And I was super surprised at this number because it didn't feel like it watching it. Was our best quarter for pressure was the first quarter, 205. Remembering 200 is elite, 180's average to their 175. So they brought the energy and the pressure pretty well in that first quarter, even though it didn't feel like it. They evened up by the end of that quarter, and they were close to parity for contested possessions by the end of the first quarter. So, as I said, the Eagles jumped out. But then indicative of, I think, sort of the match and the issue that I'll get into a bit later. But we went 205, 180, 176, 171. So we progressively got, we applied less and less pressure as the match went on. For 184 was our average. They went sort of the other way. They went 175, 207. They were quieter in that third quarter, in that pressure, in that quarter where we really needed to take advantage of it. That was the only time we had sort of felt like momentum. They came home with a wet sail in terms of their effort and pressure, 208 in that last quarter for the Eagles. So super impressive by them. What's that, a 37-point differential in pressure. They smashed us in that last quarter, and as I say, they thoroughly deserved to win, and we didn't deserve to win. Our top 5 pressure players were Jack Viney, number 1 again. He's averaging 63.1 pressure points this season. He had 77 pressure points. Kade Chandler was second. Clary, he averages 43.5 pressure points. In this game, he had 52. Nibbler, just a touch under his season average with 48. And Salo, he averages only 29.9 pressure points per game, and he was our 5th highest pressure rated player with 48 pressure points, 26 individual acts. So really good game from Salo from that perspective. Last week, our tackles were plus 18, and we had 7 more tackles inside 50 than the Blues. This week, again, sort of indicative of our contest wasn't too bad for this game. We were plus 4 for tackles, but this is the one, and it goes to those numbers before that I talked about, our contested possessions inside 50, is we were down 13 for tackles inside 50, 9-22. So repeat that, 9-22. They wanted the ball inside 50. That's a huge differential for tackles inside 50. Ground ball gets, a bit surprisingly, we were only down by 2 for that. So again, we weren't smashed off the park in that space, but post-clearance possession, they really went to work on us. Just the raw totals for clearances this week, we were 13-15, so down 2 just in the raw total of centre clearances, but plus 7, 28-21 from stoppage clearances. I thought this was a massive factor in the game. Contested marks on a beautiful day, not a breath of wind, perfect conditions for footy. 7 contested marks we could only manage, and they had 15. And so we were down 8. And a lot of them were those ones in the middle of the ground where they won the turnover, and some of them were where contested marks were just rubbish kicks from us where we kicked to our disadvantage and to their advantage. But they took some telling marks on the wing, I thought. This is a big one in terms of, when this new model, this new method we're trying to implement works. Our season average for points from defensive half is 30.7. We could only manage 14 points from our back half in this game, and that's just not going to get it done in modern footy. They scored 32 from their back half, of where we're averaging. Teams against us are averaging only 25.5. So they smashed us from the back half. This was the big one, of course, that people are talking about. So scores from turnover, and so we obviously want a really good number for this sort of indicative of our new method working well. Scores from turnover were 1-8-14 to 11-4-70, a 56-point differential in points from turnover. As I said, that's the worst since Sydney 2 years ago. Interestingly, the next worst it was also Sydney in the same season, and the first one was around 12 and the next one was around 24. We're getting smashed from turnover. That's just a wickedly bad number. So centre bounces, and this is an interesting one. So for all the talk about midfield, centre bounces was 4-1-25 to 1 goal 1-7. So we're plus 18 from centre bounces. From stoppages other than the centre bounces, so around the ground stoppages, 5-1-31 to 4-4-28, so plus 1. So for all the talk about our midfield, that's not where the issue is. Is absolutely not where the issue is. We were plus 21, so that's nearly 4 goals from stoppages. People were talking last week about we got smashed by the Blues last week because they scored 3 more goals than us from centre clearances. Well, by that logic, we completely pantsed the Eagles because we scored 3 more goals than them, 25 points in total, which is twice our season average from points from the centre square, from centre bounces. So we were plus 3 goals from the centre. We were plus 3, as I said before, for scores from stoppages. So plus 7 for total clearances from general stoppages, plus 5 for total clearances in total, including the centre clearances, and nearly 4 goals to the good on stoppages. But all of that really reinforces the point I've been making all season, that clearances are no longer that influential a stat. I mean, after all, we beat them by 4 goals from stoppages and lost the game by 6 goals. It's about turnover. 60-70% of the game is now the score is from turnover, and we could not get that part of our game going. 1-8 though, we missed some chances, so 8-1 we would have won the game. So it was a disastrous game from that perspective. And again, as I mentioned last week, it's important to note is that we are about level for centre clearances, scores from centre clearances, and scores from around the ground stoppage as the Swans. We're either just above them on both of those metrics, and that's about 15th on the AFL. It just is not. Clearances are no longer that influential. There was another game on the weekend where I think it might have been the Blues. They smashed, no, maybe not the Blues game. There was another game where a team smashed the opposition for clearances but still lost the game. If I was to pick one stat, though, like I haven't talked about this normally because it hasn't been this bad, and I want this sort of remember this number, is our kicking efficiency was 58.4%. So not much over 50% of our kicks didn't hit a target, to 74.1. So they, 15.7% better kicking than us was a massive factor. It was, all of those turnovers, so many of them were just shit kicks from us. So, the same, that's how you turn the ball over, by giving it back to them. The time in forward half, again, they played like our model under Goodwin. So the match time in forward half was 59-41. The only time we got that going our way was the third quarter, 69-31 in that quarter. The last quarter, and this, they were just rolling over the top of us in the last quarter. We weren't firing a shot. It was 74% time in forward half to 26 in that last quarter, as I say, for a 59-41 split. So nothing good there in those numbers, except, I think the work by the midfield, but there's not much else that positive can be said from it. I'm sure they had a very, very long flight back from Western Australia.
Oops, I had myself on mute. Thank you very much, big man. Let's get into some listener questions, but I might first go to George. You said we had a question in the chat room. TDS says, thanks for the podcast, long-time listener, first-time questioner. I'm infuriated by fans who invoke we when referring to the team. We played terribly and so on. If we are we, get behind the team even when there is a glitch. Too many armchair experts, not enough true supporters. He's got another question, but I'll answer that one first. I don't know. I think you can be critical of the team. We get on here every week. Sometimes we're glowing, sometimes we're critical. I think you can have constructive criticism of the team. I don't think you have to be a cheerleader all the way. We're supporters. We pay money. We want to see the best for the team. And, of course, we support the team. I support them financially. My whole family does. And, I think I'm allowed to be critical at times, as long as it's constructive. I don't know. What do you guys think, George?
It's just being realistic. And in this particular game, we played like crap.
Yeah.
It's straightforward. There's nothing
Doesn't
else
mean I'm going to not support the team.
of course not. No.
But I don't think TDS is saying that, though. He's not, or they aren't saying that you can't be critical. So, I mean, I'm not putting words in TDS's.
Yeah, I'm not having a go at TDS either.
But you know, if Demonland's any sort of the Vox, what's it called? Vox?
Vox Pop. It's not just Demonland, it's social media in general.
People launch into, it drives me nuts too. People who supposedly supporters launch into our club, call players spuds, you know, like run around sort of in a virtual Demonland forum with their hair on fire. It's like, you know,
it's not
waiting
just
for the losses. So I'm bored with that criticism.
It's human nature. It's not just Melbourne. I'm sure you go onto it.
It's okay there's nothing wrong with critique, but there's a difference between
I think
critiquing and having a thread on Demonland for 5 years is good when the right guy that's full of vitriol about how poor, which will be up if we lose this week. I bet you that thread will come back. You'll probably reboot it.
No, I wouldn't do anything like that. TDS continues, and my question is: to what extent might the change of tactics to go for a fast start relative to a structured wearing down the oppo strategy be responsible for the result? That, combined with an outlier and excellent Eagles performance, seemed to explain a fair bit of the outcome to me.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I felt like we were flat right from the very start. I don't know that I would have loved if we had a fast start. It was fast start compared to not being 5 goals down at quarter time. But yeah, it didn't feel like we had the energy we needed, and they, you know,
and they got it straight away. Yeah,
they got it straight away, and that's right. And you know, and I mean, Reid does, you know, the crowd get into it, and so I mean. I think the point about them, how well they played, is, you know, Goody. I mean, it's what you talked about, George, before, but Goody's been talking about this for ages. Every AFL club can, if you don't turn up and one team does, you're going to get beaten. I mean, you know, we know that already. As I said before, is the Swans got beaten by Richmond, and no one is seriously saying that means that the Swans aren't a contender.
All right, let's get into our other questions. We've got a couple on opposition prep, plan Bs and slow starts. D-Minion says, getting a bit sick of opposition coaches coming into our games with a plan to nullify some of our weapons. Obviously, everyone is going to do whatever it takes to cancel out Max's influence, and there is not much we can do about that. The Eagles tagged Oliver and curbed his influences. Why did we put no time into Harley Reid? Why did we not wise up to their kick-out strategy? Early in the game, they were pulling May out of the 50-metre arc, but then when Lever went off, they had the luxury to not have to do that. Just sick of us not seeming to have a game plan to negate a team, and we certainly had no plan B against the Eagles. Growl adds, since the joys of Adelaide and the big win against the Cats, we have lacked intensity. If not that exactly, then we have lacked intensity relative to our opponents who have come at us like bulls at the proverbial. Have we been complacent? Delirium concurs, saying, although the Eagles had the luxury of playing exciting footy, they had nothing to lose as they were never expected to win the game, so they took it on all night. They played with dare and dash and were exciting to watch. They caught us napping and made us look second rate. And I've got a voicemail from our good mate Enzo.
Hello, guys. What a terrible night. I think I said it early on in the year after the Sydney game. Our forward line has not improved. We needed to get in some forwards. Defence only isn't going to win you premierships. It's too much Ross Lyons, Paul Roos style. But unless Goodwin addresses these slow starts, we are going nowhere. And I think he let the cat out of the bag a few weeks ago when he said, we wait until see how the opposition is playing at halftime and then we adjust accordingly. Well, you know what's happening now? All the teams go, hey, the Melbourne starts slow, don't they? So all the teams are setting themselves up to have a fast start. So unless Melbourne just addresses these slow starts and starts actually trying to start faster, teams are always going to just set themselves to have a fast start, and they're going to get us. And they know that's the way to beat Melbourne, because you can't rely on having last quarter heroics every time. It's just not going to happen. So, fellas, but be happy. we're just the middle of the road side anyway until we get some forwards, until our forwards develop. Have a good night. Bye-bye.
So, big man, the slow starts, waiting to see what the opposition throws at us before reacting. Many Demonlanders are of the view that there is a perceived lack of planning to nullify our oppositions, and many believe there's no plan B. What do you say to that? And then I'd like to hear George's thoughts on the matter.
I would just say a couple of things is people have got short memories. I mean, it was only 2-3 weeks ago that people were lauding Goodwin's outsmarting the tactical genius that is Scott the Cat. I mean,
is this your first week? Is this your first week on Demonland?
Huh?
Is this your first week on Demonland? Do you not know how things work here?
He ran tactical rings around Scott just. What was that, 2 weeks ago? And then against the Blues, people were lauding putting Tracker forward. Oh, what an amazing tactical move, putting Track forward. He doesn't tag. It wasn't Reid who lost us the game. I mean, we already talked about what lost us the game is our turnovers. We gave up 56 points from turnover. That's because we kept on kicking it to them. You know, like I've been talking about this for years, is that how poor our kicking is. Well, it came back to haunt us big time in this match. Wouldn't have mattered if there were 18 Reids out there. And I take the point about starting fast, but it wasn't really this game. That's why I asked about what was the margin at quarter time. It's not like we were blown out of the park. They had a better start than us, and they were, like, as I said, they were 8 or 9, maybe 10 up contested possessions after about 8-9 minutes, but it was parity by the end of it. And so, you know, it was, the problem wasn't the start. The problem was the end. The last quarter was the end, is that they had more run, they had more energy, they had more zip in the last quarter. It wasn't the start in this game that was the problem. It was the end. So, I think, why didn't we do something about Reid? Is because I don't think he wasn't the difference. I thought they did a good job, actually, of pulling May out of the 50. But I talked about it before, is we didn't really have a player who could play that sort of intercepting role that Lever would normally play. We've got plenty of plan Bs. We've put them into action in the last, as I said, just 2 weeks ago, was against the Cats. And just on Enzo, by the way, if my memory after the Swans game is we were going nowhere, and then after we beat Port, we're flag finalists. I mean, he could get a job on Fox Footy.
Yes, David King.
Speaking of David King, 4 weeks ago, thanks for that.
You're not meant to listen to him, apparently.
And I did know, I read this on Demonland.
Oh, right.
Is 4 weeks ago, he said there were only 3. In fact, you might have said this, Andy.
I did.
There was only 3 contenders. Swans weren't even one of them, according to him. There were Blues, Port,
Giants,
Lions or something, or Lions, Giants.
No, Lions.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was definitely Blues, definitely Giants. I don't think he had Sydney in there. It might have been Geelong. It was Geelong. Carlton are out of the 8.
Yeah.
So, George, anything you want to add?
Oh, the only thing I'd point out is we're not a fast side, compared to other clubs. I think Carlton is the classic example. People like Walsh and Cripps in the middle in those first quarters, they cut you to pieces with their speed. We're long distance runners, and we'll grind clubs down. So don't expect us to be 5 goals up in the first quarter. If we are, the game's as good as over, because we will keep on keeping on. But there are other clubs who are very fast starters, but that's the nature of the game. Some teams are fast, some teams are sprinters, some teams are marathon runners. So I put us in the latter category, which is going to get you to the end of the season more likely.
I do wonder whether that approach by Goody sort of slightly has a potential downside, is that, maybe you were waiting for that, I don't know, that sort of balancing, and maybe that's a factor in not being as intense as that we need to be. As I said, plus 200 for pressure in that first quarter suggests that it's not as if we weren't cracking in.
Smurf says, what is happening with our midfield at the moment? They are consistently getting beaten all around the ground and none of them are having much impact at the moment. It's hard to be too critical of these guys because they've been in the premier midfield group for the past few seasons, but something is just off. 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗲 answers Oliver and his off-field issues. Brayshaw retired. Sparrow not up to the level. We are short playing off Jack Viney and Petrarca, and we need Petrarca forward because our forward line sucks. Lazy adds credit to Demonland poster at the break of Gorn in the post-game thread where he said, Oliver and Petrarca have only once finished in the top 5 disposal getters together this season. That was against the Dogs. Jack Viney has not had more than 25 disposals in a game this season. This was once a midfield trio to be feared, and these numbers are a major problem. Is this a blip, or has that decline come sooner than we thought? 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝘁𝗀𝘀's response is Viney is 29 years old, Petrarca 28, Oliver 27. Oliver has never been the most athletic player. Track and Viney are bulls, but that means they don't really have speed, so can get exposed on open field. It would be sad if at their age they are in their decline. I don't believe it, but it also begs the question on the development and training by the coaching staff. So, George, do we have a problem with our once vaunted and feared midfield?
Yes and no. It depends on the way the game's being played. The one change I've noticed across all teams is that particularly at centre bounces, is that it's much broader than what it used to be. I think most clubs are recognising that you absolutely do not let the opposition at a centre bounce come out the forward half. So they're sort of taking an extra step or two back. What that means is it's leaving more space. So I suspect what's happening, as was shown in the Carlton game and perhaps in this one as well, with that extra space, players who accelerate very quickly get out very quickly, and so they get a lot more possession than what the in and under grunt type players, which we've got. So we suffer a little bit in that. The other thing is, because of the lack of forwards, we've in the last couple of games we've moved Petrarca forward. That's taken something away from us. We've putting Salem and A and B and even 𝗍𝗲 in the middle is not a replacement for Petrarca in the middle. So while they're good enough at doing that, it's just that little level, that step down from the elite level that we've got with Petrarca. We need to put him up forward because our forward line's, as Enzo pointed out, is pretty crap at the moment. But we don't have the options, particularly when JVR wasn't available in this game. What was interesting from Binman's stats before was neither 𝗍𝗲 nor Petrarca were in our top 5 for pressure acts. That sort of tells us something is happening around there simply because they're not being put into the pressure cooker of the midfield in particular. So a few things going against us, a few things not going against us. We've still got those players. They're still very good. They still keep on fighting. Viney's been fantastic and has once again kept us in game after game simply with his relentless approach to football, which is just fantastic and what we've always needed. But we do get exposed by speed, particularly early on in the game. I wish we had an answer up forward. The other problem is the ruck. Max has been expected to play a lot more time than what he would otherwise normally want to.
It was his lowest, I think, for the season. Petty had 23 ruck contests. So.
Yeah, and the fact that we're using Petty and JVR in previous games, they're not ruckmen.
Although I must say, Petty did all right with a couple of the.
He did fantastically.
But he's not a ruckman.
He's not a ruckman, and that's our secondary problem. Who do you bring as a second ruck? Quite frankly, Fullerton's not a ruck, and that's I think starting to be recognised by a lot of people, despite the fact that he was touted as being recruited for that reason. I think Verrill's far ahead of him, but he's very, very raw and young. We're asking Max to do a lot, so Max is dropping off, and you notice when Max drops off, when he's not taking contested marks around the ground, he can't get to the to where he needs to be. In fact, in this game, I noticed Max was actually walking in the middle of the ground when the ball was being shunted down the wings by the Eagles players. He simply couldn't get back into defence.
He looked gassed.
He was absolutely gassed. Yeah. So we're expecting far too much. There's a combination of things going on. I don't know what the answer is. I wish we had another forward. I wish we had another ruck.
But as I keep saying, it's really the midfield is just not as important as it was. I mean, like this game is a really good example. Harley Reid was the standout player on the ground, no doubt. But the player ratings for this game are both indicative of how poor we were. But it goes to my point about midfielders are just not as important as they were because clearances aren't as important as they were. It's about generating turnovers, and they killed us on turnovers and intercept marks. So and the player ratings I've talked about before. So every single intervention a player has in the game is scored out of +6 or -6 to arrive at the score for the match. Number one player on the ground. This is phenomenal for a kid. His predicted rating coming into the game is 12.3, 26.7 Harley Reid. Then it was Max Gawn, Jake Waterman, Jeremy McGovern, Tom Barrass, Jack Darling, and then Clayton Oliver was Clayton was our second highest rated player. Tim Kelly, Bailey Fridge, Nibbler. So in the top, what's that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 players. There was only one midfielder in that lot. So Harley Reid. That's it. Jake Waterman, Derry McGovern, Tom Barrass, and Jack Darling. Tim Kelly was the next one down for them behind Clary. There was only in the top 15 players, there was only two midfielders in the. So we didn't lose that game because of their midfield. I mean, so it's just a sort of wrong focus, really.
We've spoken about scores from turnovers. Bigfoot says, B-Man, you've been telling us for a long time that our one wood is scores from turnovers. I don't have the final stats in front of me, but at halftime we hadn't scored from turnovers. Any thoughts on why we struggled in this area? Is that when you said that we weren't kicking?
Well,
our kicking was terrible.
Is that
why?
Nightmare of saying something over and over and no one hearing me. So that's why I talk so much, because I've never said turnovers our one wood, not once. And I note that you said it in the top of the show, perhaps preempted by that question.
No, but that was preempted by the question.
Yeah. Well, when have I ever said it's our one wood? Our one wood is, as I've said a bazillion times, is the fundamental part of our game is contest and defense, or another way, defense and contest, whichever way you want.
You also put a big emphasis on our scoring from turnovers.
Of course. I never said it's our one wood. We want to make it our one wood. That's the whole point of transitioning to the new method, is that because 70% of scores are from turnover.
Yeah.
Teams.
Okay, well, I think that's what he meant.
That number, 17 of the last 18 flag winners have been top 3 or top 2 in scores from turnover. The outlier was Melbourne's 21 flag, right? So we are trying to re-engineer our game to become competitive with what is considered the way to win a flag, based obviously on the Pies were the exemplar of that model last year, although as we approach the finals, they used our method of that forward half, but it still scored from turnover, just like the Eagles did in this game. The Eagles played a front half, forward half territory game like we have historically played, but forced the turnovers and scored from the turnovers. 70 points is an incredible score from turnover. So I've never said it's our one wood. The problem is it wasn't our one wood last year. Goody's, that's what I've been talking about. Goody has been implementing a new method that we become better at turnovers. And so we've put McVie behind the ball. We've brought in Windsor to be a link player from the halfback flank and address some of our speed issues. We've brought in better kicks, so we're not turning it over, hopefully, as much as we have done. So we want it to become our one wood. It never will, because our one wood is our defense. I mean, come on. So I find that, there's a number of things like that. So I've never said it's our one wood. we want it to be maybe our 3-wood, because contest and defense will always be our 1-wood under Goody. There's no question about that. And contest and pressure is a non-negotiable for all footy clubs, but certainly for Goody. So that's our 1-wood, that's our 2-wood, and let's hope our turnover game at least is a 3-wood. At the moment, it's a putter.
A broken one at that.
Yeah,
this
broken
week.
one. That's right. I bent it and can't play with it and have to putt with my 2-iron or something.
All right. Demon WA says, Eagles monstered us in contested marking all around the ground. That's why we didn't generate many turnovers, in my opinion. Waterman and Reid played like the second coming of Carey and Judd 2.0. We didn't play our best, but please don't talk about loading binners. Kiwi D says they also monstered us in contested possessions and ground ball gets in the first half, when most of the damage in this game was done. Contested possession got evened up by the end of the game, but it was a case of too little, too late. George, mentioned it. We've been beaten at our own contested game, monstered, as Demon WA and Kiwi D put it. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's certainly the case. I mean, the Eagles put in a great performance, and particularly the contested marks and those really telling ones down the line as well. Which
Barras,
apart from
they were the critical ones, I reckon.
Oh, they are in every game, and
we're usually doing it.
Yeah, exactly. And the people who are usually doing it were the people like the T-Max or the Max Gorns, and
Benny Brown,
Benny Brown, and none of them could get anywhere near it.
But he looked woefully out of sorts, didn't he?
Yeah. And to top it all off, we lost Lever in the first couple of minutes, who's one of our intercepting contested mark or
our number one intercept mark by a mile, by country mile.
And Stephen May, I think, had 2 marks for the whole game.
He looked off. I don't know what was up.
There were 3 players on the ground who had a lower player rating than Stephen May, and one of them was Jake Lever, who went off after 2 minutes, and the other one was Jermaine Jones, who didn't. I think he was the sub, wasn't he?
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the other one was Sparrow.
Yeah, but those are all your tools. All of us. Petty was another one. All the tools were really down, but I wouldn't underestimate the loss, the effect that loss of Lever had on people like T-Mac and May. They were expected to they couldn't move, they couldn't go up the ground like they normally would have preferred to.
We couldn't do that. The diamond or what
exactly. There was none of that, and didn't we look impotent without that? You take that third man zone out, and suddenly you look like a Port Adelaide defence.
Yep. That's exactly right. Yeah, we just look flat from all of those players. They were never in the position. And to top it all off, then you put players like Petty into the ruck. He's stuffed by the time JVR's got the same problem.
Exactly.
They're stuffed by the time they get into a position to take contested marks.
Yeah, Waterman didn't leave the 50-metre arc. It was almost like watching Dunstall play. Or the other thing, George, I thought that was really notable, and it's a pet hate of mine. It's long been a pet hate of mine. Is because we don't do this very well, or we haven't in the past, is how well they kick to the forwards' advantage. There were a number of kicks that were just placed beautifully for their forward to keep their opponent under the ball, or just kick it to their advantage, and they took full toll of it, including a couple of just beautiful kicks from Harley Reid. Any chance we can get him to the club, you think?
We tried.
They'll throw every cent they have at him. How could they not?
And unfortunately, this was a game that proved that Benny Brown, beyond any doubt, is completely shot. He can't jump off the ground, obviously, because of his knee. But what was really telling in this game was he couldn't accelerate. He couldn't get in front. Sadly, I think the end of the road has come for Ben.
It shows how bad Stephen May's game was, because there were Blake Howes, Caleb Windsor and Shane McAdam all had lower player ratings than Benny Brown. And Harrison Petty only had just a titch over Ben Brown. He had 4 points player rating, and what's his name had 4.2.
Is Ben Brown's player rating bolstered by the goal that he kicked?
It probably is. Yeah.
Well, so it should be.
No, that's what I'm saying. But take that out, and
which was off a free kick.
No, his goal was that freak one, Ben Brown, that he kicked from the boundary.
Yeah, of course.
Murdoch 516 in the chat room says, interesting at open training that Stephen May didn't do many of the drills. He was also out before the rest of the boys and had to start stretching after a kick. Could be dealing with a leg muscle issue. There was something off, I could tell, with him. And also when Lever went down, I didn't realise at first that it was concussion. I thought it was a knee. He looked like, and that's, now.
Well,
we've seen
did you reckon he did it in that incident?
I think maybe, because that's what I thought it was. I don't know. I'm not a medical, but that's what I thought had happened. I thought he'd done something to his knee.
That play
and it wasn't until they showed it.
Like it was a mistake too that triggered that sort of cascading of him getting that. We should have marked, or I forget the exact what happened, but it shouldn't have been a situation where Lever gets hit in the head.
Sam6172 says, do you think they used the 10-day break to absolutely smash the players fitness-wise? There's only two reasons I can think of as to why we performed so poorly. First is the boys were flogged during the longer break to load up and were completely cooked. Second is we just aren't good enough this year. Yes, we have beaten some good teams, but the gap between our best and worst is large, very large. If it's the fatigue factor, then the high-performance staff need to realise that we need to actually bank some wins during the season to make it to finals. Perhaps they thought it's only the Eagles will be fine, which shows that we weren't taking it seriously and got found out. If it's the second reason, then, well, there is always next year. Lever out messes with us, obviously, but good teams should be able to adapt to that and cover somewhat. Credit needs to be given to the Eagles as well. They played very well. Cleaner, faster, tougher. Harley Reid can become a demon anytime. Waterman turning into prime Wayne Carey at home games doesn't help us either. We were at the game, and if you haven't made the long walk to the Optus Stadium train station in opposition gear after being pumped by the Eagles, then I suggest you try it at least once in your life. Very humble in defeat, similar to Collingwood or Carlton fans. Andy, please convey the appropriate amount of sarcasm when reading that last sentence. Not sure I meant to read that out loud. Thanks, guys. So, big man, are we going to hear the L word from you? It could be a bit too early for that. Or has our bizarre schedule, the super short breaks, the super long breaks, have that been mismanaged, or is it just an impossibility to manage those funny scheduling anomalies, because no one's ever had to deal with these. It's the first year I can remember that we've had 2 5-day breaks mixed in with a couple of 10 and 9 breaks and 9-day breaks, and then the bye that we had. It's really, how do you manage that? And maybe they don't know how to manage it yet. Not enough.
Yeah, well, I definitely think that 100% that's a factor. So, trigger warning: if you don't like the conversation about load management, high performance being a factor in modern footy, turn your transistor off, or
you can fast forward about 30 seconds, 50. No, if it's big man, fast forward 15 minutes.
No. Is that what George said before is spot on. So, there's going to be increasingly these bizarre games. So I mentioned last year Collingwood got beaten by Hawks, but earlier this year Sydney lost to Richmond. They've just lost 2 games back-to-back by 100 points. Now they've had lots of injuries since then. As I mentioned, the flag favourite, the Cats, lost 3 in a row. The Giants lost 3 game on end after being and the Cats coming into that game, they had 160 points put past them. Now, I don't know if you watched that. I was talking to George before we came on. I did watch that because I had a bet on that game, and I bet back the Suns. And even though they were off a 5-day break, but they had done what we did. They stayed in Darwin. They've got an amazing record. The Suns. They've now won.
And they acclimatized to the conditions.
Exactly. And so their high performance program clearly planned to do what they did. And this is the second time they've done that, where they've stayed up there back to back. They've played this is the Suns. They've played 6 games now at Darwin. The last 6 games for 6 6 wins for an averaging winning margin of north of 50 points, right? Watching that game, you could tell 10 minutes in that for whatever the reason, whether it was load management or whether they had not prepared properly or they couldn't handle the humidity and the heat or the travel, they were coming off 6 days, the Cats. Whatever the reason was, it was clear fatigue was a massive factor in that game 10 minutes in, and I knew that they were going to get smashed, but they got smashed 160 points. Imagine in Melbourne, like honestly, without being silly about it, imagine if any team in the AFL, this is the Suns who are 10th or 11th on the 12th, perennial non-finalists, put 160 points past us. I mean, that is just... regardless of whether you think Cats are contenders, most people did. They were favourites for the Flags just a month ago, unbeaten when they came in to play us. 160 points. No one would have believed me if I'd said, they 160, or anyone if they put 100. That's an incredible result. Port got smashed by the Crows when they looked completely and utterly gassed. The Cats come out and get beaten by Port the very next week looking gassed in the first quarter. I just think my point being is footy fans are just going to have to get used to seemingly crazy results because, whether people want to accept it or people want to ignore it or, pretend it's not a factor, load management, fatigue, and high-performance program increasingly plays a significant role in the outcome of footy matches, in particular the home and away games, because of how teams have to prepare. So as to the question whether it was a factor in this game, I'll just say it. I think it was a factor. People could say, well, no, it's not a factor. Fine, no worries. I think it was a factor.
Is it our high-performance management getting it wrong? Is it just because we've had all these funny scheduling things that that have never happened before, that no one knows how to deal with it?
And that, to me, is exactly the right question, Andy, because if you ignore it and pretend it's not there, you cannot criticise the high-performance program. So I think so who was the question from?
Sam6172.
Yeah, so hit the nail on the head is that we need to bank wins. So it's like I've said before, it's a high-risk strategy. There's no way you can tell me that they did everything they could to prepare to win this game. I mean, we were flat right from the very start. We were, you don't give up that many. Why do you give up that many turnovers? Because we kept on kicking it to them. Why do you kick it to them? Because fatigue stuffs up people with poor technique. We could not spread and cover them on the outlet. They said it on the commentary. The guy Schofield, is that his name?
Schofield, yeah.
Schofield was doing my head in. He was so pro-West Coast, but he wasn't inaccurate with what he was saying most of the time. They were carving through us like butter. I mean, when does that happen? Now, yes, of course, there's also we may not be as good as what I think we are, and it could be indicative of that. The club might have got it wrong in terms of the ability of the team to deal with extra maybe they did do extra, maybe it is the scheduling. But just keep in mind is the last time we had a break like this was the 13 days into the Tigers game. We took 4 days off from the previous game. So essentially we had the same amount of time after the players came back as we did in this break, and they loaded them up with 3 sessions in that. And we know that because Max Gawn said that. They had 3 big sessions in the lead up to the Tigers game. What happened in that game? We could not hit a target. It was 25-23 at halftime, and we turned the ball over. Both teams did, fortunately. We turned the ball over just as many times as we did, if not more than this match. It's just that the Tigers couldn't do anything about it. So, we've got recent history to show that we've used a period like this to do extra running. So I have no question it was a factor. There's not an excuse. That's what I keep saying that doesn't excuse it. But if you ignore it as a factor, it's just ridiculous. What are you left with if you ignore it with a factor? You're left with we're no good, we're never going to be good, we're mentally soft. The other thing to consider is how many, just 2 weeks ago, we were lauding about how many players we've had under, 50 games or whatever it was, the most of any contender. Well, they're the sort of players who are going to struggle on that schedule. They're going to struggle if you do extra loads or if you sort of do extra work. So look at Windsor's numbers. Windsor, who's been one of our best players in the last 3 weeks, he dropped off a cliff this game.
His disposal was terrible.
His disposal was terrible, and what couldn't he do? He couldn't run. Like, he's our fastest player. He couldn't.
He couldn't get around people.
So
yeah.
Ignore it, don't ignore it. But it's a factor in footy. I suspect it was a big factor in this. They took a risk not preparing for it, and we paid the price. And it's huge. It's huge. If we win this game, we're 10 points clear on percentages from 10 percentage points clear of the Blues. We're similar with the Giants, and the Cats, 4 points clear. So massive risk to take, and we rolled the dice. I feel like a little bit, and we paid the price. Can you put that clip on from? This is a few weeks ago, and it said it much more succinctly. This is Del Santo talking about the importance of the high performance programmers, and I said a few weeks ago, I think they are the most important people in the game. You could even argue more important than the coach, I reckon. Yet no one knows them except of maybe your own club. We know Selwyn Griffith and we know Burgess because he's gone to the Crows. But how many others high performance managers can you name?
None. Here we go.
What do you got for us? Snap observation. I've got a couple, but the one I want to talk on about now, and I just mentioned we're a third of the way through the season to race in 6. There's only 6 teams that can win the premiership from here. They're not going to blow you out of the water, but everybody else is getting an extended preparation for next year. So of the 6 teams, the Cats, the D's, the Swans, Giants, Pies and Blues. And the layer that I'd like to add to that is, how do you get your best form and your best squad on the park when it's getting serious? So you can win it from 1 to 6 this year. I think they're that even. I think as a football lover and spectator, we're in a brilliant position to see how this year plays out. We don't always get to say there's 6 legitimate teams that can win the flag, but the game is demanding. I listened to Brad Scott's press conference off the back of their win last night. He spoke about Sam Draper being managed to be able to get them through. The game is more demanding than I think we give it recognition for right now. Like, we're at round 8 and we're talking about players getting managed. Geelong have been the best, and they put themselves in positions for decades to be allowed to manage their plays throughout the course of it. So the high performance people become extremely critical. The management of players to get them somewhere near their very best. And I've always believed you need about a month lead-in of continuity of players, game plan, and then execution. So that gives you pretty much all of August to get your set 22, maybe 24, to then roll into finals, because it is about peaking. It's like leading into the Olympics. It's like peaking for the Olympics at the right time. That will be the difference about who wins and who doesn't win the flag this year.
There you go.
There you go.
Want to add?
And as I said, no one surely is writing the Giants off. If it was, when you're subjective about it, you're not caught up in the emotion of it. No one's writing the Cats off, are they? No one's writing the Blues off, are they? I never wrote the Pies off, despite their struggles early on to win. It's a bloody long season, and it's getting longer and longer.
Yeah, I just add slightly the other factor I think people need to take into consideration is if 2 of those top 6 that Del Santo mentioned are playing each other, you can guarantee that they will drop off the next game in terms of their output. You've only got to look at what's happened to Geelong and Carlton in the last couple of weeks and what we experienced in this game. You get 2 top teams playing each other and knock them down, drag them out, a win by a point or a win by a small margin, whatever it might be, either way. But the next game they'll drop off, and they have. And George, that is true, and that's one of my punting maxims, and it's increasingly true in the last few years. And so you watch whoever the West Coast play next week, they'll struggle to come up after this game because they were hard at it in this game. But that is so true, George, is that it's psychologically as well. The Melbourne Cats game was a draining physical game. Both teams came out and had 6 goals put on them before they scored.
Eagles play the Crows in Adelaide.
They'll get smashed. I'll bet you my bottom dollar the Eagles will get flogged by 50, 60 points, and everyone will be going, what happened? They'll retrospectively say Melbourne are even worse. Is that before our game? Or is that hopefully that's the last game?
That's after. It's the last game. It's the game after ours.
Oh, good. Hopefully we'll have banked our win then.
Yeah, you'll want to. Otherwise, But the form ladder, I just saw this online, the form ladder of the last 6 weeks. The teams in 13th, 14th and 15th, Melbourne, GWS and Carlton, and below them St Kilda, North and Richmond. for the last 6 weeks.
And just another thing, I mean, injuries always has been the biggest factor in football. And who's the team who's got the best run with injuries at the moment in the AFL? It's the Sydney Swans.
Yeah. All right, DZ says, does the panel think we are a genuine top 4 contender still? It's looking more and more to me that we are lacking depth and have too many inconsistencies in our game to be truly considered a threat this year. We also seem to have no answer where Max is targeted by the opposition, and in turn, why do we hardly ever tag a major midfield ball winner such as Reid this week and Walsh last week? Oh my D says, I know this season is long, but it's hard to be optimistic about our chances when you get a bath from the Eagles off a 10-day break. I just don't think we're genuine contenders anymore. Red and Blue Rising says, this one really hurts. Just thinking back how hard we fought against the Cats and Blues, then we get comprehensively beaten by a team sitting in third last. We don't seem to have many tricks up our sleeve to throw at the opposition when it's not going our way, and we still miss absolute sitters in front of goal that kill any momentum we're trying to build. Demonstrative says, a discussion on our skill and lack of pace. Add to this our lack of athletic agility. Oliver and 𝗍ine, A and B, although he's been fantastic. T-Mac, Lever, BBB. You can add some others. Couple this with the new game plan, and is this team still premiership worthy? And we've got a voicemail from Doug Reamer.
Gentlemen, Doug Reamer here. I'll make a statement and then I'll ask a few questions about it. First off, pretty insipid performance. Enough senior players out there to put up a better showing than that. Boys, I think eras, you don't get to pick how long they last for, and you get a short window to take what you can when you get them. And I had a gut feeling after the last few years that it's closed, and it's closing really fast. You can see our depth is really limited now. We've let, for lack of want or need, we've had to let players move on, and it hurts when you see them playing at other places. My questions are, do we have enough depth to win a flag? Can we still make the top 4? And what are your thoughts on the mid-season draft? I mean, if the club's fair dinkum in trying to resurrect its campaign for this year, they need to pull one out of the hat, or a couple, given, I don't know, lists, what's they need to find someone and something fast to plug a few holes. Otherwise, this is just going to be this. We won't even be going out in straight steps. We'll be lucky to get to one step. Anyway, cheerio, boys.
We won't go into the mid-season draft. It's still a while off, so we'll talk about it when we come to that. We also had a question someone had asked, I think Garbo had asked about going into the trade period at the end of the year. I think we'll shelve that till later in the year. It's very, very early to talk trades now. But I know what B-Man's going to say about whether we're a top 4 contenders or not, and we'll hear from you in a moment. But George, are we still top 4 contenders? Are we just making up numbers in the 8? Or are we perhaps not even good as we thought we were and in danger of not making the finals?
We're still top 4 contenders. The trouble is that at the moment on the ladder, I think there are probably 14 teams that are top 4 contenders. I do have worries, concerns about our depth. I spoke before about the ruck problem. The forward line problem is just finding enough bodies in there. We just don't have the replacement bodies when injuries invariably occur. Thank goodness for Fritsch kicking goals, because not too many other people are at the moment when we need them. We're certainly still in there. What happens in the coming weeks, I think we'll certainly know probably in the next month whether we're serious or not. Other teams will start to have played basically everybody else as well, which is another factor. I mean, Essendon have had a dream run against the teams that they've beaten so far this year.
And they've got Richmond this week.
Yeah, just to top it off. And the Essendon fans will be going off. But I think it was something ridiculous, like they've only beaten the bottom 8 sides or something like to this point. So it depends on who you're playing, who you've beaten, your injuries. Give us another month and we'll have a better idea about where we're going.
B-Man.
Yeah,
You wanna,
I think we will finish top four.
Right. Yeah, okay. So, let's move on.
But
Our next
luck
one
plays a huge factor, and we
know
due some luck. We could do without injuries to our best intercepting defender, and I concur with George's. I think all teams, to be honest, have depth issues, like every team. But I do worry about our lack of second ruck because, one, if Maxi's out for any length of time, who's that going to be? I mean, remember that for all of the criticisms of bringing Grundy in, the whole point was to help give Max a chop out. And it doesn't look like Fullerton has grasped his opportunity, or if he has, it's a whiles away. And Varel, I'm confident he can get there, but he's got to build a tank, and he might be a fair way off AFL level as well.
The next one, I'll just read it out, but we've discussed it. Singer says, just wondering how much effect the lever injury had on our fortunes in the game. I know the Eagles got out to a hot start against us even before Jake went off with concussion, but I thought that maybe we could have righted the ship as we've had some similar slow starts and clawed our way back into contests once we settle. Having lever off really unsettled us down back, and we never really recovered once we lost one of our best weapons in our interceptor. What do you guys think? Discussed it to depth. It definitely had an effect, and now that he's out for a month, it's kind of.
And the other thing I'd add is that I think we were flat for whatever reason. We weren't running across the ground as well, and it just makes it harder to get third man into a contest if you can't cover the ground. If you watch when we're on, is players will sprint to cover off and get the third man in. They did it a few times. They were brilliant to watch, and so that made it more difficult too, I thought.
Royal Demon asks, what was the panel's thoughts on McAdam's debut in the red and blue? I was a little bit disappointed that he failed to make the distance with a shot from 35 to 40 out. We've got our good mate 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁 chiming in on that too.
Boys, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 here. What a game for the Melbourne Demons SS. Probably the most disappointing game I've seen in a long time. I think it's far worse than that Brisbane performance. I just felt like we were outplayed in all facets of the game. The lever injury obviously didn't help, but just felt like we had far too many passengers. I'm not too sure on the ground who actually won their position. Not many. Interested in hearing what your thoughts of Shane McAdams' game was. Thought he was okay in patches. Wasn't happy about him not making the journey from 40 out and trying to lay off another ball from 40 out directly in front. You'd think a forward would be able to kick that far. And also the calls for Billings being dropped, and even Tom Sparrow getting a little bit of heat. Not too sure it's merited, but yeah. I'm looking forward to some positive spin from that one because that was pretty painful. Thanks, bye.
Well, hopefully you'll get some positive spin. We'll talk about Jack Billings in a second. But, George, what did you make of Shane McAdams' debut for the D's? Were you concerned that he didn't seem capable to make the distance from inside 40? And then I guess his confidence was so shot from the first effort that he didn't even attempt the second effort, and we coughed it up from that kick, pass.
It's difficult to make any real assessment of McAdams' game in this one when we only had, 36 inside 50s for the whole game. The opportunities for forwards, I don't think Fritsch had a touch in the first half.
No.
Effectively showed how poor the lack of opportunities were there. It's his first game. He's still not fit.
No.
Up to the required level. He was completely shot by the end of the game. And we've talked about fatigue and those factors when you're kicking for goal previously. So I hope he can do better. He's got to show something. He'll have the opportunity simply because we don't have a great number of options available with that small forward. And if we're using 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 in the middle a lot more than what we have in the past, then there is an opportunity for McAdam to show something in the next couple of weeks. Probably the perfect opportunity coming this week.
There were two times when 𝗍𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀 hit him up quite nicely, so I'm looking forward to seeing a bit more connection between the two of them.
Yeah.
A bit underwhelmed, I have to say. Agree. Soldy makes a good point, actually, is that I can't name a single player who won their spot, really.
Yeah.
I mean, there was no 𝗟𝗂𝗋 maybe. 𝗟𝗂𝗋 was our highest rated player, so let's give him that credit. So 𝗟𝗂𝗋, other than 𝗟𝗂𝗋, I really can't think of any. I was a little bit underwhelmed with McAdam, and this is going to sound funny, but he's not as big as I thought he was for some reason. I've seen him at training, so it sounds funny, but he doesn't. I had in my mind that he would be the player who could play that sort of defensive, offensive / forward that 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗁 was playing, but he's not as physically strong, or he doesn't look it as physically strong. He doesn't look like he is a player who could naturally play that role that 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗁 did. So he's it'll be good to have 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗁 back post-bye. That's a positive. But he's got good skills. So, it was a bit strange him not making the distance, because I've seen him at training flush him from that distance. So, the one time I've seen him train.
Did he kick right through it? I don't know. I didn't rewatch it. I don't know what happened.
It was cheering. I thought it was straight through the center, and
it's going straight through.
They marked it on the line, which is another brain fate. How do we allow them to mark that?
Yeah, no one was on the line. No one was on the line.
There were so many things like that. We won.
If T-Mac was forward, he probably would have.
We won the Richmond game. It was worse. The only comparable one in recent times was the Essendon loss in Gather Round last year, but this was miles worse than that.
Radelaide says, I was really happy with Salem's return game. It's good to have another option in the middle that can also slot back to help the drives off half back. One of the very few shining lights. B-Man, any thoughts?
Who? Sorry, what was
on Salem's game?
I thought he was good. I thought he had a solid game. As I said, his pressure was good. I think from memory, I said he was third on the pressure. He had 8.9 was his player rating. His career average is 7.8, so a touch over his career average. It surprised me actually a little that his career average is only just on 8. But I thought he was good and won a couple of clean balls when we really needed it in that third quarter. We couldn't take quite advantage of it, and he missed a couple of targets. But also he wasn't the main concern around the turnovers, was he? So I thought for a player coming back after 4 weeks.
I think he missed 4 games or 4 weeks, including the bye that we had.
Yeah, I thought it was a pretty good return, and I'm looking forward to him being in the side and a regular for this next block of time. We need to settle that side down. We've had too many players coming in and out.
Lefty says, after 10 matches, I've come to the conclusion that trading in of Jack Billings has been a bust. He was billed as being a good user of the ball, and I've not yet seen that on a consistent basis. I get that he's not a high possession player, but that means that he needs to deliver on the meagre possessions that he accumulates. He lacks the penetration in his kicking, and he's not taking his chances in front of goal to be a worthy addition to the team. I would rather blood some young and hungry talent like Colt and Doggy Brown Jr., Sir George. Jack Billings has quickly become a bit of a whipping boy in the online Demons community. Has his acquisition been a bust? Do we persist? And if not, who do we replace him with?
I haven't seen anything from Billings. I spoke about this 2 weeks ago. I haven't seen anything from Billings which would justify him playing in the seniors at the moment. He can't kick beyond 40 metres under any circumstances, it seems. His accuracy is questionable. He certainly doesn't seem to be able to take set shots for the opportunities he's had. For this game, he had the grand total of 119 metres gained off 8 kicks. Rivers, for example, off 9 kicks, had 344 metres gained. He's not contributing. It's as simple as that. He's in to run the ball, to move it into the forward line, and he's just not doing it. I think the easy solution this week is Langdon in, Billings out.
And that brings us to the next player, Langdon. OMID said, I had a feeling that losing Langdon for personal reasons would hurt us, and it really did on game day. I hope he's back next week. So, B-Man, losing Langdon, he's been a mainstay in the team for the past 3.5 years, is very noticeable.
It was massive.
The weekend.
Not so much losing Langdon, it's losing the kilometres that he would run. Because it's like George said, is that, him and Windsor, but him and Nibbler in particular, they offset the grunt from Oliver and Petrarca and, that mix of different type of athletes. We just so much missed his ability to cover huge ground. It was so noticeable, wasn't it?
Who was playing?
Where's our defensive help? You know, where's
Who
that
was
player
playing
pushing
his
back
role?
into? Sorry,
Who was playing his role? Who was on the other wing?
well, Billings, I think.
Billings.
Billings, yeah.
Yeah.
He wasn't going back and doing that defensive stuff. So,
And so, I mean, look.
well, I
mean,
think Windsor had to go back because there were a number of times Windsor was manning up some big,
and he wasn't covering
darling,
the ground. Windsor wasn't getting up and down the ground. Is that, that's another, if I was sort of critiquing Goody's selection, I'm not sure. I mean, we've talked about Billings, but 𝗟𝗂𝘃, I think, has been, he could have played that wing role. And
he was all right. I don't know why we don't give him more of a go. I thought he was playing a good role.
Who came off? I didn't even. Who's up?
That's
Lever,
Lever.
of course.
About 2 minutes into the game, we've talked about him 17 times.
Lever went at 100% disposal efficiency.
One kick.
Well, Woden looks like a kid who's played his third game or something. He's working his way into it nicely. He's a nice deliverer of the ball, and he knows how to read the play.
And he set up that one of our good goals from centre clearances with a
And he
delayed handball over the top. It was a smart
He
bit
doesn't
of play.
panic. He doesn't panic. A lot of first gamers are looking to, I've got to give it off quickly. He's like,
The other thing I liked is he made a mistake at some point and then cracked back in and got the ball or halved the contest. And so, I thought he did some all right things. And on meters gained, you stole my gag I was going to use, George. I was going to say, well, Billings had more than twice as many meters gained as Benny Brown, who only had 53 meters gained.
Mandy Lorian says, I've been impressed with T-Mac's renaissance as a defender this season, but he got torn a new one by the informed Waterman today. I think the move of Petty forward has been a complete bust, and I think we need to swap them, Petty back and T-Mac forward. I don't think we'll make these changes, but what do you guys think? So, George, any thoughts on Petty as a key forward and possibly switching him with T-Mac? I don't know if that question was done before the Lever news, so... any thoughts on?
Wasn't that where we started? T-Mac forward and Petty back.
Yeah, moving deck chairs on the Titanic.
And basically that's what we're doing. We're shuffling deck chairs on the Titanic, trying to fill holes. Petty is a great mark. The knock on T-Mac is his agility, which is better suited to a backman, or his lack of agility. Although he's a long distance runner,
His agility's been so much better this year, T-Mac, though. It's remarkable.
But I can't see Petty's good at leading and presenting more so than T-Mac. But T-Mac's got a lot more strength, I think, which is needed down the back. So I don't think we'll see any change. And he might have been torn a new one, as they say, by Waterman.
Who's having a fantastic year. I don't think many people would have beaten him.
And like I said, if Lever was there, Waterman would barely have got a touch.
Exactly. And I reckon that cannot be underestimated because he's not a one-on-one player. He's not brilliant one-on-one, T-Mac. His go is to use his athleticism and ability to get up and down the ground. And, he was exposed, poor. But, I mean, he should blame bloody Steve May because, Steve May should have been getting Waterman.
Yeah, but then it would have been who gets Darling. So,
But
we were that one player down, that one athletic player down that killed us.
Yeah.
Let's get on to the 𝗚cie. The 𝗚cie Demons faced a challenging match against the Brisbane Lions, entering the game with a depleted lineup due to the growing list of injured and unavailable AFL and VFL players. With Melbourne taking all three emergencies to Perth, the Demons were always up against it with only 8 AFL-listed players available and only Lachie Hunter and Bailey Laurie with any real AFL experience. Unlike their AFL counterparts, the Demons bolted out of the blocks and led by 26 points a quarter time and maintained that advantage deep into the second quarter. However, the second half saw the Demons overwhelmed, ultimately losing by 7 points. Oliver Seston kicked 4 goals. Bailey Laurie worked hard for his 24 disposals, 5 marks and 5 clearances, while Kynan Brown collected 23. Will Varell was persistent, finishing with 16 touches and 9 clearances. Bowl reports Lachie Hunter struggled to impact the game with 13 disposals. Defender Andy Menzies-Wakefield had a busy day with 28 touches and 4 marks. Young key position players Matt Jefferson, 2 goals, and Jed Adams, 8 marks, continued to develop but couldn't sustain their efforts for 4 quarters. And George, before I get into any of your thoughts on the 𝗚cie game, Jane02 asks, I know George wasn't exactly complimentary about 𝗟𝗟𝗍𝗃's form last week at 𝗚𝗚, but I've been watching him closely and he had a great game for 𝗚𝗚 on the weekend, booting 4 goals. Is it time we start looking at him and giving him a run in the seniors? Who else at 𝗚𝗚 do you think, do you see getting a game this season? Keep up the great work.
I'll answer Jane for a start.
Yeah.
𝗟𝗟𝗍𝗃's problem is the same problem that Tomlinson's got. There's the same problem that James Jordan had. There's the same problem that Bailey Laurie has. Who does he replace? You're trying to... Seston's been playing as a small forward. Who comes out in lieu of him?
And he's behind Tolstrup anyway.
And he's exactly. He's a natural footballer, a great footballer. He's finally got some sort of tank. I reckon another pre-season, and he will get another season as well. He will start to show something, but he's just such a natural footballer. I love the way he plays, but in this game, it was typical. They kicked 3 goals in the first quarter. And 1 in the rest of the game. Yeah. Not that the team did much more.
Who were the emergencies before you go into the game? It was Tomlinson, Tolstrup, and who was
Fullerton, I think.
Fullerton, yeah.
And
okay.
In this game, what was telling, once again, it was such an awful game. From last week, where we won by a point against Carlton or whatever, we took Hoare, Woden, Tomlinson, Tolstrup, Ben Brown, and McAdam all out of the side. Brisbane had 2 AFL. Brisbane had 2 AFL listed players playing for them. We had guys that were bringing up from God knows where, Sandy Dragons, I think, and all sorts of people trying to fill the holes that we took. When you take 7 players out 1 week, it's trying to find people of a reasonable standard was pretty difficult. So, despite the fact that we, I think we led by 26 points at quarter time, did very well. We kicked 6 goals in that first quarter and then 2 for the rest of the game. That sort of tells you individual efforts. Seston kicked the first goal after 10 seconds, quite literally. So that was great to watch.
13 seconds.
And then kicked 2 more in the first quarter. So 3 in the first quarter. In terms of the individuals, Kynan Brown, I reckon, is the next most likely to get somewhere. He's a player who's... I wrote it down. See ball, get ball. It's almost like 𝗦cie. He hasn't got the strength of a 𝗦cie, but he's just puts in, and he seems to be bobbing up all over the place, more so than anybody else on it. Adams and Varel are just getting better. They're learning their craft. They don't need to be thrown necessarily into the seniors, although Varel must be very close because we need him. Hunter was awful. Quite frankly, he's just got no second efforts. He's walking around the ground, not doing anything. I think it was really telling that Langdon was out of this side this week,
and not coming in for
not coming in.
I mean, he's the one who should be. All the talk about Billings. If the natural swap would be Hunter for Billings.
Yeah. But you would have thought that this week, without Langdon in there, he should have been there in the first place, and he wasn't.
I totally agree. That's a goodie slap down, I reckon.
Yep.
That's got Grundy 2.0 all over it.
Yeah, long way out.
He'll either be playing for someone else or playing in another VFL team next year.
Yeah. Andy Moniz Wakewell, lots of possessions. Were they effective? Were they... There was just nothing that really stood out in the game.
It disappoints me so much because I was hoping he'd have that X factor that he doesn't. He doesn't do it. He hasn't got enough hurt in his game, has he? In terms of scoreboard impact,
he's just a role player and nothing more.
But he promised, maybe he still will get. I mean, it's again. I think it's so. Again, they got to get the tank.
Yeah. Yep. So. Yeah, they lost by 7 points in the end, but the game was pretty awful to watch as a general. The first quarter was fantastic. It was free-flowing, multiple goals kicked by both sides, and then it all died in the end. But not surprising, given for both sides, they had, third-level players effectively filling the gaps.
Well, you've got a Demon badge this weekend, George, watching that game and the West Coast Melbourne game. That's definitely a Demon badge.
All right, well, let's move on. In addition to entering concussion protocols, Jake Lever has injured his knee, requiring surgery, and will miss the next month. On the positive side, well, hopefully, after sustaining a concussion against the Blues, Jacob van Rooyen hopefully will return to the lineup. We're in the dark about Langdon's withdrawal from the match for personal reasons, which is fair enough, as they are personal reasons. But I guess we don't have any idea whether he will return this week. At the time of recording, we haven't heard the full wash-up from the weekend's matches, so there's no mystery injuries of the week yet. So that's all we know at the moment. And all the other players on the injury list are not ready to come back into contention to play. So let's get into the changes versus St Kilda. Red Jacket says, we'll be making a few changes this week. I think Lever with concussion, and I guess now the knee, will be a forced change. If Langdon's personal reasons not too serious, then he should be a walk-up start. Rui should be over his concussion, so he will be back. What changes will we make? B-Man, followed by George. B-Man, since you're so good at with the changes that happen each week.
Yeah.
Your predictions are fantastic.
Well, I mean, Lever. You think Tomlinson comes in, don't you, for Lever?
I think so.
Yeah.
It seems to be the logical one.
There's no Turner. There's no Hall.
Yeah.
No.
Who else comes in?
So I don't think Billings will get dropped because,
No.
and
Well,
again,
who
it
else
goes to the conversation about what role he's playing. We don't know the specifics. But again, as I said a couple of weeks ago, if he gets picked again this week, he did have an average game. He wasn't Robinson Crusoe, though. That's for sure. It'll be an indication that he's playing his role. I'd personally I wouldn't, if he is in the same, I wouldn't mind to see Wowie come in and play the wing. I think I'd like to see him get a run at it. I don't think they'll make wholesale changes. It's not really Goody's way particularly, but it's not as if we've got a million options either. Tolstrup might be maybe someone they could look at for a bit of X factor to reward. Often, if you look at Goody's sort of pattern, is that the players in and around that emergency sometimes get a crack at it. So, I mean, the obvious one's Tomlinson for Lever.
Well, JVR comes in.
Oh, sorry, JVR comes in. Yeah,
comes in. But we could put JVR in, move Petty back for Lever.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Well, geez, that'd be hard on. That's fair comment. That'd be hard on Tomo, wouldn't it?
I'm just.
Yeah.
I'd keep Tomlinson comes in simply to replace Lever. JVR in for Ben Brown.
Ben Brown. Yeah, I forgot Ben Brown.
Oh, okay, Ben Brown. Forgot. Yeah. No, that's right. Yeah, JVR. No, yeah, good call.
JVR probably comes in.
McAdam stays.
McAdam stays.
Yeah.
I think Tolstrup's a big positive and a big chance this week. Woden probably in the starting lineup.
And Billings out.
Billings out.
Yeah, but you said Billings out a few weeks ago, and he's still
I'll keep
there.
saying it until it happens.
What is it? A broken clock is right twice a year.
Yeah, exactly.
Andy, before we jump into the preview of the Saints game, there's in the chat room, Murdoch 516 notes that he saw a stat, or they saw a stat, that Oliver, Viney, Petrarca, Gawn, Fritsch, May and Lever are all basically having their worst year for ground balls, or the worst season for some time. I saw that as well, and it's interesting because a couple of weeks ago, or a week or so ago, when I asked Willow about the post-clearance contested possession stats, he put up a whole bunch of numbers, historical numbers, including the ground ball get numbers over the last 4 seasons, and you can see the change in pattern or the change in method just from those numbers. So we dominated for post-clearance possessions in 21, 22 and 23, like dominated, number one, number two, like just smashed. We were the so far best for that stat, and same for ground ball gets in that period. I don't think we're always at number two, but then this year, those two numbers, post clearance possession and ground balls, have created based because they're not as fundamental for the transition game as they are for a forward half game of footy. You don't have as many of them for a start. You don't have as many ground ball gets because you're chipping it around the arc, you're moving it around, the ball's in motion, and you're having far less contests.
Well, I'm glad that's what you've extrapolated for that. I thought you were going to say they're just too old and can't bend down to pick up the ball.
No, but it's just a sort of note that sometimes the numbers, like data, you could grab any sort of bits of data, but without context, without some sort of analysis of what they mean, all they do is point to something. And often the game moves forward and it's like clearances, like hit outs to advantage. Hit outs to advantage is a nothing stat. And it might have been 5 years ago, 6 years ago, but it tells us nothing anymore, nor do disposals. It's probably been 15 years since the raw number of disposals have any meaning. It's about impact. It's about what happens with the football, not how many times you get it. And so that ground ball one is just, that's a grain of salt to look at that number.
Well, what happens if we change our tactics and it makes us worse?
Well, if you go back to the Blues game, we ground ball, or in this game we actually did all right in ground ball gets. It was only 2 or something. And then similarly in the Blues game, because we did play a more contested game of footy.
All right, we'll get into our preview of the Saints game. The D's return to the MCG this weekend for only our 4th home game in 10 matches. Can you believe that? We face the Saints, who arguably have been one of the most disappointing teams this season, only having won 3 games and sit in 14th place on the ladder, equal with the Hawks and the Eagles. Most pundits had the Saints as certainties to make finals this season. And as the weeks progress, that dream for them is slowly fading. However, luckily for them, they're coming up against the Demons, who are notorious for playing sides back into form. How's that for some MFCSS late in the show? George, followed by Big Man. How are we going to beat Ross Lyon and the Saints?
Membry will kick 5 because he always does.
Absolutely. He will monster us. MFCSS.
I watched the Saints game. They were absolutely appalling. It's been a long time since I've seen a team
worse than us.
They should have lost by more. Freo just could not.
That was such a woeful game, that one.
Yeah.
Except I won on it. I had a good win on that game.
Yeah. If it wasn't for Jack Steele and Rowan Marshall, they kept them in the game. The rest of the side,
Freo's inaccuracy kept them in the game.
Well, yeah, certainly, but St Kilda players just won't go in. They will not go in. They're sitting on the outside, expecting the ball to be given to them, and then they can, play the way they want to. But there's just no effort at the ball. So I think we will absolutely smash them, particularly around the ball, getting the ball. King in the forward line is not as good as his brother by any stretch of the imagination. The Saints fans still think he is. Membry's dropped off from what he was before. He just simply doesn't have the impact. They've spent all their tickets on all these second-rate players, like the Butlers and the Higgins and even Hill and Crouch, and they just haven't got any talent left in the side to fill the holes, because most of those players are either gone or they've been injured themselves and unavailable. Apart from if Freo kicked straight, it would have been a 10-goal win for against them. They were just awful, but it's the lack of effort that comes from them. Lyon will probably try to turn it into a dour type of match, because they have no chance of being even close otherwise.
Well, that's essentially become their method, that's what they try to do to Freo, and Freo have gone to this really slow-scoring method as well. I couldn't believe the odds in that game. I know it was at Marvel, but they had 2 more wins than them, Freo, going into that game, and they were almost both on level. They were both equal favourites almost, not quite. That was such a dour game. And you're right, they'll flood back against us at every opportunity. They'll make it, really they'll do their best to try and make it hard to score. They've got the ranked third in turnovers per game in the AFL so far this season. So hopefully we can go to work and turn around that turnover stat. It's worth noting, 1-8 from that's a really weird number, because our actual expected score was almost exactly what we scored. But it's weird that part of the game in turnovers, if it was 7-2, that game, we win the game. So it just shows the importance. But so they're turning the ball over a lot. Hill's dropped off, I reckon, in terms of his influence. He had a great year last year, but he doesn't look anywhere near as sort of damaging, does he, George?
No. He's another one of these players who who needs the ball in his hand, but at the moment somebody's got to give it to him.
So the other one is interesting for us if talking about clearances. So we'll see how we go with centre clearances. They're second in least opponent centre clearances per game, which is a good, that's and third in team to opponent turnovers per game. But I thought this was really interesting for a Ross Lyon coach team. They're 14th in 1%ers per game, which goes to your point, George, a little bit about they don't seem like they're cracking in.
No.
16th for centre clearances per game, 13th for score involvements, which is unusual. I mean, and they're not scoring, I guess. 13th for intercepts per game. They're defensively set up to stop teams scoring and stop getting smashed, basically. So it'll be really interesting to see how we approach this game. I'm hoping that we do look to attack and we go hard early because, hopefully they'll be stung into action. They'll be focused on a fast start because I think that once you get out to it, they're a team like Freo. If you can get out past the 3-goal lead, they're going to struggle to score quickly. They don't have weapons to suddenly put on 5-6 goals, even like West Coast do. They don't have any sort of comparative weapons up forward. I mean, Marshall's solid sort of he's a good ruck, but he's a ruck, isn't he? So
yeah. And I think Marshall in this game against Freo, he was their leading clearance player.
Yeah.
Which tells you what the rest of the midfield's like.
Well, he's their statistical. I'm just looking at the list here. He's had more contested possessions than anyone in their team.
Yeah.
So that's 118 for the season and 11.8. So he averages the most per game too. He's their ruckman. That's not a good sign, is it?
Yeah.
All right, boys.
And Andy, when's the last time we played the Saints at the G?
We played them at Marvel last year. Because
it seems I don't know whether I keep on in my mind's eye seeing a black and white. I don't know why, because I've never seen a football game live that's in black and white except for Collingwood. But I don't recall watching a game at the top of my head.
I know we 100% did in 2018, but we must have played them since then. I remember Petty's first game against them. I remember he had that terrible one. There's probably people screaming at the transistor radios. Give us a weather report while I look that up.
I'll do one other.
Since we're not playing a Marvel, Since we're not playing a Marvel, give us a weather report. Melbourne Cricket Ground 2020
at Marvel. By the way, we get the opportunity to play West Coast again, which is a real positive, isn't it?
Yeah, we do. We do get to play them at the
Suddenly, G. That becomes a grudge match.
We did play them in 2022, round 8 at the G, but before then was 2019.
Sunday is partly cloudy, chance of rain 5%. Melbourne area is partly cloudy and light winds, minimum 6, maximum gone 16.
Which means it's going to piss down.
Yeah.
They're never right.
Fortunately, the following day, there's no rain, so that's the one to look at. But it still probably will rain or get dewy or windy, and then we're gone.
It's a 3:20 game, isn't it, on a Sunday?
It is 3:20,
yeah. All right.
And I won't be able to go, as I said before, so I completely muddled my weekend up and got a family dinner, so unfortunately I won't be able to see a famous victory.
But you get to watch it, though.
I'll watch it, yep.
Well, I'll be there. I will be there. And we'll be back next week. And, guys, we're going to come in under the 2-hour mark. So I think that's a win,
it's a win
for our listeners.
It is for our listeners.
Well, we're going to leave it there. We'll be back next week. If you want to listen to the show live then please head on over to Demonland.com on Monday night at 8:30 p.m. Thank you. Well, I would normally say thank you to our 5-star reviewers, but we didn't have any, so please get reviewing and help us out. Thank you to our voicemailers, Enzo, 𝗟𝗶𝘀𝗁𝘀𝗁, and Doug Reamer. And as always, your questions and comments are an integral part of the show. And thank you to our Demonland posters who submitted questions and comments. Thank you to Dominion, Growl, Delirium, Smurf, El Diablo, Lazy, Bigfoot, Demon WA, Kiwi, D, Sam6172, DZ, Oh My D's, Red and Blue Rising, Demonstrative, Singer, Royal Demon, Radelaide, Lefty, Mandalorian, Jane02, Red Jacket, Garbo, and Fritter and Turner. Thank you to my co-hosts, George and Binman, and thank you to you, our loyal listeners. Don't forget, leave us a 5-star review and a comment on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcast from, and we'll read it out on next week's show. Go Demons!
Go Red Leggers!